And I've been producing computer games and card games and role-playing games and publishing them since I was a kid. I'm actually working on a computer game for the past 5 years. So I'm a game developer. Although, very interesting, you think being a game developer, I would be an expert on this subject. I'm not. And there's a lot more to it than knowing about games and knowing how to program games. That's something I've learned while doing the research and speaking also to our speakers about this subject. There's a lot to it. And actually, we are not going to cover this subject comprehensively in the next 60 minutes. It is huge. But we're going to go beyond the surface detail either. We're going to be going into some use cases and some practical knowledge that you can take away. And just before we go into the speaker, I want to say something. I posted this on LinkedIn a couple months ago. Games are unique as a genre of human activity where users take ownership for it and see it as a cultural object more so than most other things. And then, like, one of the things that people will say is, this is my game, this is a game. But then after they've played it, they'll say it as, this is my run through or my playthrough. So they identify with it. And we'll go into that a bit later. I think that's enough preamble. I think we've got people signed in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce our first speaker. Alexa is signing in from Belgium. She's head of marketing at Strive Cloud. And Strive Cloud does something very interesting. They have you can describe better than I can, but she's a gamification. And actually, I've learned a lot about it from her. And a lot of the things I thought I knew about this subject, she disabused me of while I was researching this subject, and I was recently having some conversations with her. Welcome to the event, Alexa. Thanks so much for coming here. And do you mind telling us a little bit about what Strive Cloud does before you start?
Yes, for sure. Hi, Jose, and hello, everybody. Thank you for the warm introduction. I would also like to add to it that I've been working for different technology-focused companies for the past 7 years, and I noticed from a marketing side, there's a real problem with user engagement because you really spend money in acquiring new users, but if they don't actually build the habit of using the product, they're just gonna churn, they're gonna drop off. So when I joined Strive Cloud, working for a gamification software company, it was really interesting to see how by simply adding a layer of gamification to a technological product, you can actually incentivize the user behavior. You can create an engaging experience that keeps user motivated to come back and actually, enjoy using the product. So that was quite exciting.
And I know a lot of people are they're looking, and this is what it's actually, they see it almost as a remedy to a pain. They'll say, oh, our adoption rates are terrible. And I hear it's really good in games. So what are they doing that we're not doing? And but then they'll actually almost, let's just get gamification. And now I've heard this expression, just add gamification. And I think sometimes people don't understand what that means. So before we actually go into it, can you explain what's the biggest misconception when you're talking to people that they have about this idea of gamification, and how you educate them?
Yes, for sure. A question that we get a lot is gamification about building a game? Are you gonna build a game for us? When actually gamification is not about building a game, but using the same elements that make games fun and motivating to play, and the same psychological triggers to create an engaging user experience. So, for example, think about a game. When you just start as a gamer, you don't really have the skills to finish all the levels. So the game really takes you in a journey. It takes you in a journey with missions, with challenges, and based on your performance, you get different kind of rewards that I actually saw my nephews doing the same challenge over and over again. Again, he had like a battle with the ultimate boss to go to the next level, and he was doing the same level again and again for hours. That's really grunt work that he was really hyped and motivated to do it again and again. And basically, this is the result of a gamified experience that keeps the user motivating, doing an action that's actually quite boring. I don't know, like data registration, or just, yeah, there are a lot of things that can be gamified just to give groundwork meaning.
The I think I've noticed myself with my play testers. Some of them have played the game like 20 or 30 times, and I said, "Why do you do that?"
Yeah,
They, oh,
exactly.
I didn't like the ending. I want a better one. So I played it again like 10 times to get the end. It's, oh, I wouldn't have done that. It's fine. I wouldn't. And the
Yes, but
um
it's just the feeling of progression and our interesting need to level up, to be better, to feel that we progress, that we have that sense of achievement and curiosity and surprise. They're elements that really trigger our psychological, yeah, motivation.
hmm. And the I think my experience is a little bit different because I'm in narrative games, and one of the big things in narrative games that we have is I think they have the same thing in movie. They call it the drop. About 25% of the way through the playthrough, some of them anyways, not all companies do this. They'll give the user a choice, a really big choice. So like the first 25% of the game, it's almost a learning module. And it's like we're told the designers, your job as a designer is to teach people how to play the game without a manual while they're playing it. That's your job. And keep them engaged and they have to have a good time. And then at the 25% mark, a lot of the time, not all the time, we'll have this thing called the drop choice, where you choose something. You make a choice, and that choice is going to stay with you for the rest of the game. You're gonna choose what faction or what class or what weapon, or if there's a romance element, you're gonna do that. And I think a lot of players will identify, and that's what point they'll go, it's mine. This experience is mine now. I've made this choice, and now I'm no longer an audience. I'm a protagonist now.
Exactly. The game mechanic and the game dynamic that works behind it is the fact that the user feels empowered of taking their own decisions. And then it's also the element of surprise on, yeah, what's going to happen after I make a choice, right?
Yep. And it's very interesting. I could talk about this for a long time in terms of coding it. I have a lot of if then statements in my code where it's like, okay, you make this choice and then 12 different things can happen. Um, how can, so we got people here who are not from the gaming industry, a lot of them from healthcare, a lot of them for um, all kinds of industries. How can they apply gamification to their digital products? How do they do that? What kind of advice
Uh,
do you give to people?
Yes. So going back to the first statement that gamification is not about creating a game, it's actually using the same elements that make games fun and motivating to play in a non-game context. The same thing can be applied to digital products. So we need to start with who is your target audience, who is your user, and what kind of behaviors you want to trigger. And you have short time behavior, and you have longer times behavior that you want to trigger. And usually this behavior also needs to be aligned with your business goals. because you're not gamifying just for the sake of gamifying. You're gamifying in order to push the user journey forward and meet your KPIs. And once you identified, okay, I know this is my user, this is my these are my business goals, you can actually start thinking, okay, what can I do? What kind of game elements can I introduce into the experience in order to engage my user? And here, for example, you can add, depending on the behaviors you want to trigger and incentivize, you can create, set a milestone, create challenges, and then reward your users for their achievements with points, with badges, the idea is to create a variable reward system. For example, you can have, I don't know, like a scratch card, and the user scratches the card and then gets a surprise reward. So all these elements together create a gamified journey that incentivizes the user behavior. But again, it's not like a one size fit all solution. It's really important, who is your target audience, what behavior you want to incentivize, and then you can decide what game mechanics, what game elements to use.
Oh, by the way, people, if you have a question, we're going to have a Q&A section starting up. Don't wait for the Q&A to start. Go ahead and put your comments in the questions in the chat right now. It's interesting what you just said. You know, there's an app I use every day, Duolingo, and they have a negative game, which I find is it's like the opposite, and it's like it takes all your worst words, all your biggest problems, and it creates a game using all your weaknesses. It takes all your weaknesses and puts it in a game, and so it's all your faults, everything, all the words you mess up the most often, all the grammar mistakes you make the most get put into this game, and then you go to and it'll, every once in a while say, all right, here's your Jose's personal foible game, and then you've got to play this game, and you're actually I'm glad to play it because these are the things I need to work on, right, to progress. And then it's all right, you've got up a level now. You've those problems go away now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how? So you people are applying game elements into the game. What kind of benefits do people see when they add game elements to their digital products? What kind of changes do they notice?
So I think one of the things that changes is the user. So you really create an engaging and rewarding user experience inside the product. And for that, the user is going to be more engaged, is going to come more often to the app, is going to complete certain goals on the app. It can actually generate word of mouth. There are multiple ways to multiple goals on which gamification can serve, and here really depends on the industry. For example, I know a gamified health app is called Pain Squad, and it's a health app It's a data collection health app for children and teenagers who have cancer and they're fighting cancer, and they need to complete a pain questionnaire every day. And initially, they were trying to incentivize patients to complete the pain questionnaire by just simply offering monetary rewards, but they had 70% of the kids were actually completing it. So they decided to turn it around and gamify the experience. So now you have the pain monsters, and everybody, you have the pain police, which are them, and they really need to report their pain in order to defeat the pain
Oh, I
monsters.
see.
So then exactly, and then they're still giving, they're completing the questionnaire every day, but they have a mission. It has meaning. They feel different. They feel like they're fighting. And this is something that gamification was able to do for the users of that app. So it really depends.
I've actually started using a data collection mental health app. Thymia. It's called Talk to an Alien. It only takes 2 minutes, and you have to do this kind of word game, pronunciation game. It uses your microphone and your camera, and it gives me a diagnosis of my stress levels, my confidence, how tired I am, how's my attention, how's my focus, and it's been really accurate. And it only takes me 2 minutes. And because it's a game and it's kind of funny, I play this funny game. It actually, I don't feel like I'm being data harvested. I don't mind. It's like, oh, I want to know, and then you get the checklist at the end. We've got some questions coming in. Um, let's see. We're gonna get to all of these, but I want to actually ask you one right now. How receptive are people over 60 to gamification? Are there any research on this? And actually, I want to say something first.
Yes,
When
I
I
will
was a
also
kid,
add, yeah.
you're gonna add something. I want to. When I was a kid, which was a long time ago, I told my mom to look up computer games, and she looked at me like I was an alien. The first time I told her, "Oh, well, I want to play computer games," she'd be like, "What?" And she thought I was playing a game with a computer toy, not a game in a computer. Now she plays more computer games than I do, and she's 80. She's turned 81, so she she's an avid gamer. So I'm going to turn this to you, Alexa. How receptive are people in their 60s to gamification? And is there any
Where
research on this?
um this, like, if it's any research on this, I definitely, I don't know it, I don't know it by heart. I also have a personal example, and it's as well my mom. In the past, yeah, 5 years she's been using Duolingo. I'm using Duolingo, but she's practicing her English on Duolingo, and she's really literally doing it every day. And when I talk to her, like, yeah, we're on holiday, you don't need to do it today. She was like, no, 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 I'm losing my points and I'm losing my place on the diamond
Oh yeah, you can't
leaderboard.
drop out of the
And
Diamond
she's
League.
exactly, I can't lose my streak, right?
It's
So
also your
she's
friends are
very,
watching, right? So you have your friends are keeping track of your progress. So even people I
yes.
haven't seen for 30 years, right? They know. Oh no, you dropped out of the Diamond League on Duolingo. And I think
Yes.
um we should. Here's a question. I think we got some other questions here. Um, any tips for gamification for medical devices? SW. What's SW stand for? Professional users. This is from Diana in the Netherlands. Any
Mhm.
tips for gamification for medical devices? And this is the thing now that's happening in Europe is more and more medical devices manufacturers are releasing companion software to go with the
Mhm.
device. And do you have any experience on that?
Um,
Gamification for medical devices.
we have experience with gamification for health, for web and mobile apps, not for devices in particular. But here, the logic behind is quite similar, because how you implement it might be different, but the way you start thinking on how you gamify, it's always the thinking process is the same. And you need to start, who is your target audience? So are these the professionals using the device? Are these the patients? What is the age of the patients? And then what kind of behaviors you want to incentivize through these devices? And then you can think, okay, what game elements can work? Like, how am I going to trigger the behavior? I'm going to create a challenge, levels. How am I going to reward my users for their achievements? Um, and then you can actually, yeah, test and iterate and see how it works. The idea is not to implement too many features, like too many game-like elements in the beginning, but just build your experience slowly and see how your users respond to it. But before you start, you really need to do the gamification design thinking in advance, starting with thorough user research.
And just to add, Diana, I'm going to get back to you with some more because I think I know a couple of doctors and who aren't in this meeting. I'll get back to you with if I can come up with any case studies. And I think actually what we're going to do is we're going to bring on Bryn. We're going to say goodbye to Alexa only temporarily. We're bringing her back. the Q&A.
All right,
And
thanks.
so thank you very much, Alexa. And Bryn is a digital content strategy director. Bryn has been in digital content since before it was called digital content, I think. And I think you've had every kind of role in digital content, haven't you?
More or less. Yeah. Hi, everyone.
And
Thanks for the intro. I mean, we worked together a very long time ago. It was more sort of customer service, content, and operations. I've been a product owner. I've done some Scrum mastery. I'm now a strategist. I've been a content engineer. Um, I've been a search engine engineer. Yeah, I've kind of exhausted the roles I can do. I need them to invent some new roles so I can apply some stuff.
they'll come along.
Hit a wall, really. But yeah, no, I've definitely been in the game, getting a bit long in the tooth. But I've been in the game for a long time, and it's really interesting to see how things have changed. It's also really interesting to see how things are coming back around. Yeah, there's a lot of change afoot in the content world, and I think as we head into Web3 and spatial computing and all that exciting stuff, there's going to be even more change.
I actually had one of the first questions I had from somebody in relation to this webinar. And I actually just referred him to one of your posts on LinkedIn. He said, Jose, I want to do something with content, but I don't know which channel to use. Right? And he gave me a big list of channels. And I said to him, what do I do? And I basically said to him, I referred him to what you said. And says, well, think of the content, put that first, and you can always change the channel later.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, all of them and none of them, if that makes sense. Yeah, you got to kind of be agnostic with it. It's a different way of doing things, especially for UXers. They like to design the framework around everything first, and then the content kind of comes last. But you're kind of inefficient if you're doing things that way, I would say.
You know that we do that in the game industry as well. Some guys do it. Sorry, some people do it, where they'll actually write the code of the game,
Mm-hmm.
and then they'll insert the content later. But then it's like, if you do that, you're making all the choices, you know? And maybe when the writer maybe the writer wants to have an opinion, you're just telling the writer, okay, writer, just fill these boxes, that we've created in the code with story. Put stories in these boxes.
It,
And it doesn't really work that
no, it's
way.
too prescriptive. It becomes very boring and sort of unexciting. I was speaking to somebody else about this the other day. He used a sort of analogy around making movies. You wouldn't just make a movie without a script. You kind of need to know what the story is and what the content is. So yeah, it's weird how people don't think the same way when it comes to sort of experiences that are driven around content, digital experiences.
Yeah, you wouldn't let I'm sure the movie producer wouldn't go, well, these are the locations, so
Off
write
you
a
go.
script for these locations.
Yeah. Hey, let's improv the whole thing. I mean, geez,
So bring you. I think you're the first person from big enterprise that we've had in our webinars.
Okay.
So I'm kind of really curious to ask you this question,
Yeah.
which I don't normally get to ask, is how is big enterprise looking at games, game elements in the digital content space?
Mm.
Is there excitement? Is there pushback? What are people concerned about? What are people excited about?
I'm going to use a quote that an old agile coach used to say to me: "It depends." And I say that a lot with people. It's not a cop out as such, but I think there are certain elements of the industry. So for me, I've always been with the sort of big multinationals, American Express for a long time, Adidas before my current role with IKEA. I think it depends on where you are. Certainly, American Express will probably do gamification before it was ever a thing. Points, right? I mean, membership and points is a big part of gamification in my mind, anyway. Adidas were way more tuned into it. I think if you think about Adidas as a brand, they have direct connections with games. You think about what was FIFA is now called EA Sports Football Club or something. They've got their boots and their products and their balls featured in the games. They're part of it, right? It's very, very closely tied. And as a result, when things started coming around like the metaverse and that sort of more mixed reality and that kind of blurring between sort of gamification experiences and game experiences and more sort of shopping experiences, they were ready and they were primed. I mean, Nike have been very good at it as well. They've dropped a bunch of sort of NFT style products, and it's about that collectible element of things. And Adidas are very much sort of following suit and making sure that they're being able to meet the consumers where they want them to. For too long, big companies sort of just did what they wanted to do, and they're all slowly coming to a realization that actually it's not about what we think and what we want, it's what about the users want and think, and we've got to meet them where they are. From an IKEA point of view, I did hear somebody told me, one of my colleagues, I mean, one of my colleagues is so into this, I tagged you in a comment to her, Jose, a lady called Timmy. She sort of started a gamification or a game sort of internal group where we just chat and talk about games and sort of just get into it as a feature. It's a little bit harder, I think, when you're sort of dealing with, you know, homeware products and furniture. It's not as obvious link as EA Sports,
Mm-hmm.
But that said, IKEA have done a lot of stuff in mixed reality. They were the first company, I believe, to do AR furniture in your home. That to me is all sort of linked to where games have come from. I mean, thinking back to things like, was it Virtua Racer? And you thought that game was 3D, and it was just, you look at it now, it looks terrible, but that's been part of our psyche and part of our development in the sort of growing up and experiencing games. And because you're exposed to that and that becomes part of what you know, when you can then take what you know and put it into a shopping experience, it's a really powerful thing.
Okay. Now you're a lot of people have been thinking about. You've already covered that question. Sorry, I'm going to skip that. You're an active gamer,
Yep.
and is gaming experience
Mhm.
all you really need from a digital marketing perspective, or what other kind of knowledge and skills do you want to bring to the table when you're looking at these kinds of projects? I know you do a lot of communication with software developers too.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it's a good start. I mean, it's a good start for anything in life. We as creatures love to enjoy and have fun, and even you look at puppies or young animals, they play, they have games, right? And it's just part of how we are as mammals, I guess, and probably beyond. um I think from a gaming point of view, it's very driven by storytelling, and I think storytelling is key to any kind of experience, and especially a sort of sales experience or a buying experience for a consumer. um it really puts you in a position of telling a story, taking people on a journey, and getting them to buy into what it is you're all about. And like you said at the top of the webinar here, people start with it's a game and it becomes my game. And that's a really powerful thing. It's a bit similar to something I've noticed recently around how people interact with brands. People want to reply to people on their social media, and they want to be friends with the brand and kind of have that connection. So there's a definite change in the way people are sort of operating with brands, and it needs to be more of a shared story as you progress. In terms of actual skills to complement the storytelling, I think you need to know about UX and UI building, and making sure you're building stuff that's understandable. Um, Realistically, you probably need to have a bit of product experience as well in terms of how agile works, if that's how you're doing product, and most people are these days, or attempting to. Everyone's got their own version. um, and I think having a holistic view of anything and a helicopter view of anything you do is a much more powerful way of approaching things. So yeah, starting point. I mean, why not start with games? It's a great way to build, and it's a great way to experience, and it's a great way to learn. But on top of that, you've got to complement it with some extra stuff as well.
You know what you said? It's interesting what you said about storytelling, and because one thing I do know a lot about is the narrative behind games. And the interesting thing is they use the same structure that novels use.
Mm-hmm.
They use the same structure that television and movies use, to the point where it's like at the 25% point, And actually, if you watch a Hollywood movie, if you watch a Marvel movie, any Marvel movie, and let's say the movie's about 100 minutes long. I mean, they're not 100 minutes long, but let's say it is 100 minutes long. At the 25% mark, I guarantee you, plus or minus 45 seconds, the protagonist is making a decisive choice
Mm-hmm.
in the movie. They've gone from passive to active. And it's
Yeah.
the same way in games. And then games have a third act structure. And Asian storytelling is a little bit different. They've got a four-act structure, but it's actually very, very similar. They got a 25, and they break up the middle act into two pieces. It's universal, it
Mm.
seems. It seems to be human beings understand information and process information better if it's given to them. Jokes are the same. Jokes have a three-act structure too. You
Yep.
know, you have beginning, middle, and the end, and the middle's a little bit longer than the beginning and the end.
Yeah, it's the power of three, right? It's a big linguistic mechanism. Politicians love it. I'm not going to quote any politicians. It's not what we're here for, but it's an interesting one. I want to go back to something Alexa said actually, which I agree with you, Jose, on that. And it is that kind of structure and that familiarity, and that's why we resonate with these things and resonate with experiences and games and movies that all kind of make us feel the same, make us feel cozy, and make us feel familiar. But there's an interesting point around that just kind of winning. And I was thinking back to games back in the day. I mean, you know, I was a Game Boy user and played Tetris to death, right? And probably failed some exams as a result of it, or at least dropped some grades because I was playing Tetris when I should have been revising. But that game doesn't really have that prologue. It doesn't have the learn to play. It just has to play it, and you either do it or you don't do it. And I think it's really interesting that you still get drawn into that just achieving of you might die repeatedly, but you get better and better and better. Um, yeah, I meant to sort of put it in the chat earlier when Alexa was speaking, but it's a really interesting dichotomy that yes, we love that kind of storytelling and longer form game, but at the same time, those simple wins and those simple kind of moments can also really draw people in.
You know, it's interesting with games like that. It's almost like a methodology here. Fail fast. In Tetris, you fail fast and you fail
Mm-hmm.
often. But you fail, but then the next game just starts up again. So you kind of it kind of just motivates you to get up and go and do it again. And I think actually we've got a lot of questions. So we're not saying goodbye to Bren. We're not sending him off. He's going to stay on screen. But can we bring Alex? Oh, by the way, we got one point about Amelia, and she apologizes. The entire Thymia staff got this stomach bug that's going around the UK, and she really wanted to come, but she's really ill. So I'm going to mention, by the way, she's the game I told you about that test your mental state in 2 minutes. It's one of hers. They have a bunch of games. You play it, and you do your voice, and you have the camera, and it can predict if you're at risk of a mental health condition. It can also tell you if you need to take a break, if you're stressed, if you're overworked, if you're like me and you work too hard and you need to take a break. This lap in 2 minutes, they'll say, "Wait a minute, you're stressed, you're tired, but you feel really confident. So you're confidently sailing off a cliff, Jose. But we're going to bring you in, hopefully in May, into another event. And I'm going to, if you look in the comments of the event afterwards, I'm going to have a link to our TED Talk. So now we've got a lot of questions, and I'm going to start with one. It's actually kind of and I'm going to answer it, and then we're going to bring it to the panel. And this is actually one of these, it's more of a comment than a question. And actually, the person who posed it was actually commenting on business practices, but it's not about business practices, it's about community. So he's a software developer in healthcare. And he says that I see that the game industry puts usability and quality up front in terms of development. And in healthcare, people focus on functionalities and don't formalize non-functional elements like performance, usability, portability. And then everyone wonders why the product isn't as high quality. If we could apply the standard way of developing apps that the game industry uses, if game industries developed apps like the healthcare industry uses, they'd be unplayable and they'd be chaotic and incomplete, and no one would want to play them. Why can't healthcare do what games does? And I actually wanted to comment. This is actually not a business question. This is actually this is actually a community question because I've got my game. I'm a game developer. I'm nobody. I've had my game's been played 20,000 times. If I were to pay them minimum wage, and I don't, they do it for free. If I were to pay them all minimum wage, I'd be close to €1 million in testing fees. And I think most people building in healthcare, especially if they're launching a company, aren't going to spend. I mean, this is one thing: a healthcare company, people don't go approach healthcare companies saying, "Can I test your products for free?" Whereas game companies, they'll have this community, and maybe that's one benefit of using gamification. You develop community, and now the community wants to engage with you, and they'll do things for free. Whereas, like Pfizer, it's a huge corporation, but nobody does anything for Pfizer for free. You know, no one's going to say, "I'm willing to test your drugs for free. I love you guys so much." It doesn't happen. Whereas game companies, they have people lining up to do this by the thousands, and they're having to say no to these people. I don't know if you guys have anything you want to add to that about the communities that gaming engenders and how businesses can maybe be able to capitalize on that in terms of building their products and testing their products and iterating their products. Does that
I
make sense?
Yeah, it completely makes sense. Well, I know from the experience with Strive Cloud, because before the company started, we actually had a community platform for gamers, where gamers were coming to participate at tournaments, and then they were winning Kaiser coins that they were exchanging in the shop for winning branded prizes. And gamers are a hard to get audience, and they're also like quite a difficult audience. They're difficult to understand. They're quite particular. But also you have hard time gamers who can be very passionate, and they will go the extra mile to test things for you and participate in the community as well. So I think being able to really build like a gaming community, it's not easy. Like we see it with some of our customers who want to replicate the model that we had with Kaiser, and it's difficult. But if you want to build a community of users around, like of customers around your business, that is possible. And using gamified elements to engage the community, it works.
The let's see. Brent, did you want to add anything to that, or should we move on?
Yeah, I was going to do a quick add if that's all right. And I was just going to say as well, you're saying we're not paying to. Sometimes people are paying companies to test the games. Like it's coming the other way, right? They're so desperate to be part of that experience and that community that they're maybe paying for a preview or a demo, or trying to get in there early. So it's interesting how the sort of the tides turn. I think from a community point of view, pretty much everywhere I've worked always talks about community. And if you crack the community, you're potentially going to be succeeding as a brand. I think when going back to Adidas for it as an example, there was a lot of community even before games became a thing, right? Think about the musical communities, or the sort of sports communities that were obsessed with, I don't know, Stan Smith trainers in the tennis world, or everyone saw Run DMC come out in the 80s and they had to have their Adidas shoes. So there are communities out there that did exist, and I think the gaming community just takes that to another level. It's so global. I mean, if we were intergalactic, it would be like there's no doubt about it. We'd be playing games on different planets, and we would all be playing against each other. And I just think it's an endless sort of possibility. And the closer we can get to, I don't want to say exploiting that as brands, but harnessing that as brands, the better we'll become, and the more sort of togetherness we'll have with our consumers and our users.
Yeah, I've been really impressed by the communities I've seen, like the Discord channels and some of the forums. Like even small game companies will have 60,000 members of their communities online and testing all their products, and they will go out and hype their products. That's unreal, and they're not even big businesses.
The guys who made Horizon are based here in Amsterdam, and when they dropped Horizon 2, they sort of put on this treasure hunt around the city and put up props and like that sort of community stuff where you can actually get out of your house and off your gaming chair and like into fresh air. It takes it to another level. So yeah, I think it's great, and it finds ways of pushing the boundaries every single time.
I remember when they launched Pokemon, the real
Pokemon
life
Go, yeah.
Pokemon Go, and people were commenting, "Who are these people?" You'd see them in the street in the middle of the night. People with these mobile phones going like this in the middle of nowhere, and people were like, "What's going on?"
Zombies.
Yeah, I remember back then I was working in a very big like corporate district, and then you see like during lunch break people suited up hunting Pokemons in the bushes. So
All right, I got some more questions. Um, can you give us a bad example of gamification? And I think a use case that seems like it could be a good use case, sorry, a good application, but you would advise against. And I think some people, I hear this on LinkedIn, people say, just add gamification. And some people say, well, it's more complicated than that. And it's, I don't know if you can answer this, Alexa. Do you have
uh
people coming at you and they're using it or they're thinking about it incorrectly or they're applying it to the wrong use case?
I don't know if necessarily like you're applying it incorrectly. Like you definitely need to as I said before, take a step back. What's your target audience? What behaviors you want to incentivize? But the thing is, and it's something that I noticed. Today you have a lot of gamification implemented inside financial apps, including investment apps. And gamification, for sure, it can work there. It can increase engagement, investors' engagement on these apps. But the downside of it is that by simply making investment as a game, you will tend to incentivize short-term goals instead of long-term goals. And I recently read an article about it where it can even lead users to invest in stocks which are above the risk tolerance. So I think gamification inside investment apps, it needs some regulations and just making sure the users are aware the actions that they're taking and they're not just having fun with their own money.
Yeah. There's a massive debate in the game industry about loot drops and paying to play and things like that. I don't know if you want to add anything, Bryn. Any horror
I'm
stories
going to
you've heard?
massively agree, and Alexa's point reminded me of what's becoming a bit of a scourge of society. I would say these days. I mean, my granddad used to go into the bookies and get his little pencil and do the horses, but the amount of gamification that's gone in betting apps and the amount of betting companies that are embedded in pretty much every walk of life, and they'll sponsor anything, they'll sponsor your dog. Like it does, they're everywhere. And I think, to Alexa's point, it's a dangerous way of gamifying life because people are. I know there are regulations and rules that are sort of more prominent now, but chucking money at stuff, a game, is a very dangerous thing to do. And yeah, I do worry about potentially the longer term impact that could have on society at large.
All right, we're going to have to
Absolutely.
move quickly now because we're going to run out of time before we run out of questions. I've got a question here about what would be a lean way to introduce some gamification into an app without over engineering it. This is a very good question because it's so easy to over engineer a game. I know from experience. Should gamification be thought as a core feature, or can it be an extra layer on top of a product? I think I'm going to agree with
Yeah.
Alexa here. She hasn't answered the question yet, but I know I'm going to agree with her.
Yes. So definitely gamification is an extra layer to an app. And when you get started, for us with our customers, we always start quite simple. For example, if you want to incentivize your users to log in daily on the app and complete a registration, not a registration form, I don't know, like a data collection form, then you can create a weekly streak, or yeah, how they say it. And then you can reward the behavior with a coin. You can create your own virtual currency and then add some challenges. And this basically can be a simple way of introducing gamification with 3 core elements. And then when you launch it, ideally, a best practice here at Strive Cloud is to launch it on the small segment on a small user segment and see how they respond. And based on how they respond, you iterate your milestones, you iterate your challenges. Yeah, you iterate the gamification experience. And then when you see, okay, users are responding to it, they're engaging, they're participating, then you can roll it out to your whole user base. So it's really not a one size fits all solution. It's about experimenting with your users and then learning from it and then keep on moving forward.
We've got a lot of questions. So I'm going to give instead of asking you the same question, Brent, I'm going to give you a different one if you don't mind, because we're going to run out of time. I was wondering if you could play a fun game of imagining the game market in the future, like say 15 years from now. How psychic are you feeling, Bryn? 15 years from now,
Right.
could you tell us what would be the biggest gains, biggest and the landscape in general, in your opinion?
I saw the question pop into the chat and I thought, wow, I love the question, but then I thought, what is the answer? I mean,
15 years is a long time in games.
Yeah, and like I said earlier on, we're about to hit a bit of a sea change in terms of Web3, spatial computing, and I think the landscape is going to change an awful lot. In terms of the biggest gains, I mean, are we talking gains in terms of financial gains or just the way the games work? I guess it depends.
Games work, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty tried and tested. I can't foresee it being that different. I just imagine that the quality will continue to improve and it'll become more and more lifelike. You look back through the consoles and as you sort of get through look at the GTA games, for example, you can see the pixels improving, right? I think it's going to become so much more realistic. I guess maybe a risk there is does it become too realistic? Does it become hyper realistic and we get a little bit lost in it and it becomes problematic in some way because we can't differentiate fact from fiction?
I want to say something, and this is what I'm doing for my next game. One thing that's going to happen really soon, I think, is we're going to be seeing large language models modifying the content of games. So instead of saying ChatGPT make something up, ChatGPT take this bit of narrative in a game and modify it slightly. Because when people are producing games, there's only so much content they can create. But they would love to be able to tweak the content just a little bit. Like in this scene, this character's dead. Or in this scene, this person's mad at this other person. Can you just tweak this content? And I think we're going to see a lot of that come out. And not
personalization as well, right? It'll feed on gameplay data and different insights. And as we potentially link our IDs to a centralized or decentralized ID that we own ourselves and feed that back into gaming, then you're going to get personalized experiences in games. And if you like games to play a certain way, the models and the machines will start live developing them to work how you want them. That's going to be crazy.
I got a question I want to ask you, Alexa. Normally I give the same question to everybody, but we don't have time. So what advice do you have to people who want to pursue gamification with healthcare apps and systems? And healthcare is broad because you've got this is a huge. You can almost do an entire webinar just on this question.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I think from what I know, healthcare apps and applications are quite heavily regularized. So it really depends on how much of gamification can you actually do inside an app. And then, yeah, it depends if you have a team inside to, build the gamification features. If you have a team of a gamification expert inside, or then you can go for a consulting company to create a gamified design. And then you can go back to your team. Okay, do I have the technical capabilities to develop it or not? So there are multiple. Can be definitely a whole webinar about the use of gamification in health. But from what I know, going back, I know the apps can be quite heavily restricted because it's a lot of data protection, data privacy. It's not. It's heavily regulated.
Oh, I've done 2 webinars on healthcare regulations and data already. And it's getting more complicated all the time. Brent, I'm going to ask you this question, and I think it might be a bit out of your bailiwick, but have a go at it.
Have a crack.
Have you seen gamification used for learning platforms? And
yeah, I mean, tons. I mean, I one of my favorite things at school, and when I was in junior school, I'm talking sort of maybe 8 or below, and this is going to show my age. We had a bunch of BBC computers in our computer lab, and the main thing we played on that were learning games. It was a game called Pod, I think was his name, and he was a little brown ball, and you would sort of type commands in and say, Pod can dance, Pod can, walk, he can cry, and you get into sort of you feed these commands in and see what he was capable of. And I guess thinking back, what they were trying to teach us as young children was about emotions and emotional intelligence. And of course, being kids, we really asked some abstract things to see if he'd do anything weird, and he wouldn't. But yeah, I mean, even going back to that very long time ago, it was a big part of learning. And going further through my schooling, I remember I sucked at maths. Like, I'm good with words, but numbers isn't my thing. Used to work in finance, and I remember having a sort of tutor CD-ROM thing that helped me with maths, but it was very gamey and very fun. And it reminds me of your earlier point around sort of keeping things short and sharp. And we talked about it in the build-up of people focus for about 40 minutes at a time. And I remember it saying to me, take a break. And even that I absolutely loved. So yeah, it's out there. I mean, I probably haven't done as much gamified learning recently, and we talked a lot about Duolingo, which is probably the best example currently. But yeah, I think it's been going on since dawn, really.
When we talk about Duolingo, there's also a danger, and I think Hugo, I think you asked about the lean agile. I think actually in the last batch of features, Duolingo decided we're going to add more gamification, and they added so many new gamification features, and the apps keep crashing now. So it's like there's almost like there's a bad example. Duolingo is a good example and a bad example of gamification, because they actually had a really good system, and it's really frustrating because when they bring up the explosions and all these animations, my app keeps crashing where it didn't before, and it's like I even wrote to them, can you like test your gamification before you launch it, because my app doesn't work anymore. I don't know, Alexa, if you wanted to take a stab at this question, we're really close to running out of time.
Yes, for sure. Like for me, gamification in learning is one of my favorite ways to apply it, because you can really make learning more impactful. You can improve student grades. You can improve course completion. The applicability of in learning, I think also most of the research is done on gamification in learning, and you can really see a lot of results coming from it. So yeah.
Okay, I've got the curtain call from the technical producer. We're going to wrap up now. And some people have had some questions. They sent us some questions we haven't answered. I will get back to you and I want to thank everybody. Bryn, thank you so much for coming to the webinar. And Alexa, thank you so much for coming as well. And
thank you.
Really appreciate all the questions and all the enthusiasm from the audience as well. You guys have been great. And we're going to do another event on this subject later on in the year. And that's all from us today. We're out of time. Take care. Have a great day. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.